Monday the 22nd arrives without noise. It doesn't knock. It doesn't ring a bell. It doesn't disrupt the familiar rhythm of your life. But if you pay close attention, you may feel that something very different is happening inside you. Like an old door, one you believed had been shut for a long time, quietly opening just enough to let a thin stream of light slip through. Libra is used to keeping everything in balance. You are used to standing in the middle, seeing both sides, being the mediator, the listener, the one who yields. You learned how to live gently, so no one else would get hurt. And because of that, some important truths were placed too low, sometimes hidden altogether, simply because you feared they might disturb that fragile sense of peace. This day brings a very specific moment, not shocking news, not a sudden number appearing out of nowhere, but a quiet realization. You begin to see clearly that your story with money has never been just about money. It has always been closely tied to how you see your own worth. It might happen in an ordinary moment, while you're doing familiar work, while you reflect on everything you've given, while you remember the times you stayed silent instead of speaking up, and suddenly your heart softens. You realize that for a long time, you've lived as if abundance existed somewhere outside of you, as if it had to be granted by someone else, as if it would only arrive after you tried a little harder, sacrificed a little more. Then the light shifts. It reaches a different corner. You see clearly now that you were never lacking. You simply never paused long enough to look directly at what you were already carrying. Experience, subtlety, the ability to understand people deeply, patience, the gift of creating harmony where there is chaos. None of these were ever invisible. They were just treated as ordinary, so they were never called wealth. There is a familiar sadness many Libras carry, the feeling of always needing to prove something. Prove that you deserve to receive. Prove that thinking about money doesn't make you selfish. Prove that you are still a good person for wanting a more abundant life. And along that path, you forgot one important truth. Real value does not need permission to exist. The 22nd feels like a mirror that has finally been wiped clean. When you look into it now, you no longer see someone chasing safety. You see someone who has accumulated so much, yet never allowed themselves to name it. You realize the problem was never that you weren't skilled enough, lucky enough, or hardworking enough. The problem was that you became used to dimming your own light so everything around you wouldn't feel too bright. And when this truth appears, it doesn't scare you. Instead, it brings a strange warmth, as if you've just found something that has belonged to you all along, a sense of relief, the understanding that you don't need to become someone else to deserve abundance. You only need to stop turning away from yourself. In that quiet space, a gentle question appears. It doesn't rush you. It doesn't demand an answer. If you've always had more than you thought, what made you live as if you were always lacking? That question doesn't need an answer right away. It only needs to be carried with you, like a seed placed into soil that is finally ready to receive it. Because once the light gets in, it continues to spread, slowly, patiently, at your own rhythm. And from here on, the story of money is no longer just about numbers. It becomes a story about how you treat your own value, little by little, in the everyday choices that now stand quietly in front of you. Some stories are not written through one single dramatic event, but are formed through many small moments, repeated over time. For Libra, this long season of endurance rarely begins with obvious pain. It begins with kindness, with the desire to keep everything calm, with saying, "It's okay, I'm fine," even when something inside quietly sinks. You became used to doing more than you were paid for, not because you didn't notice it, but because you believed that if you tried just a little harder, everything would eventually balance out. You became used to giving more than you received because you understand other people's emotions and you never wanted anyone to feel uncomfortable. You accepted unfair agreements simply because you feared that if you spoke up, the harmony would shatter and you would become the disturbance in a picture you worked so hard to keep peaceful. Those choices never made you feel weak. In fact, you once believed they were your strength, the strength of patience, of endurance, of putting the collective above the self. But over time, something subtle began to happen. Each time you stepped back so someone else could move forward, you quietly taught the world how to treat you. And you also taught yourself that your value could stretch, could shrink, could be reduced just a little, as long as everything around you stayed calm. You may not have realized it then, but your body knew. Fatigue began to build. Tension surfaced whenever money came up. A hard-to-name feeling appeared when you thought about asking to be paid fairly for your effort. Slowly, money stopped being a source of security. It became a source of pressure, of anxiety, of the constant feeling that you had to hold yourself together just to prove you weren't being greedy. You became used to putting other people's needs first. So used to it that at times, you could no longer hear your own voice clearly. You convinced yourself that sacrifice was the right thing to do, that tension was the price to pay, that if things felt too easy, maybe you hadn't earned them yet. And so you accepted living inside a smaller version of yourself, not because you had no choices, but because you believed it was the only way to keep things balanced. But the truth is gentle, and it is also painful. You became used to living below your true value, not because you didn't know you had value, but because you were afraid of what might happen if you lived fully in it. Afraid of disappointing others, afraid of breaking the pleasant image you had built. Afraid that by asking for more, you might lose the affection you deeply cared about. This day offers a moment of reflection, not for blame, but for understanding. You begin to see that what you once called endurance was actually a message left unspoken. A message saying that you too need to be respected. That real balance cannot be built on endless self-sacrifice. That harmony does not mean remaining silent in the face of unfairness. When you allow yourself to look directly at this journey, you may feel a wave of emotion rise, sadness for having neglected yourself for so long, and also relief, because at last, you are honest enough to acknowledge it. Within that honesty, something very important begins to form. An awareness that the beliefs you've carried for years may no longer fit who you are now. That there are other ways to live, ways where you no longer have to trade your inner peace just to keep the outside world calm. When this realization quietly appears, it doesn't demand immediate change. It simply exists, like a subtle sign that something old is ready to be set down, making space for a clearer, fairer way of seeing yourself. Some cycles don't end with a clear period. They dissolve slowly, like an old habit that no longer fits into a new life. The 22nd carries that feeling. Not a major event that forces you to stop, but a very quiet moment when you realize that the beliefs you've carried for years no longer tell your story truthfully. Deep down, Libra once believed that they weren't good with money. Maybe you said it as a way to reassure yourself, or as a gentle explanation for the times you didn't choose yourself. But when you look back honestly, you see that it wasn't entirely true. You weren't lacking ability. You were lacking trust. Trust that you deserve to keep what you earn. Trust that you deserve to decide. Trust that you deserve to be in control of what you create. You also believed that money threw you off balance. That the more you thought about it, the heavier it felt. That money carried responsibility, stress, even a tightness in your chest. But now, a very gentle question appears. Is it really money that takes away your balance? Or is it the way you've had to bend yourself to meet other people's expectations around money? And perhaps the heaviest belief of all was the idea that to be wealthy, you had to trade pieces of yourself. Your softness, your kindness, your ability to keep the peace, something you've always valued deeply. You saw too many images of success tied to hardness, competition, and sometimes coldness. So you quietly stepped aside as if saying, if that's the price, I'd rather stay where it feels safe. But this day brings a very different truth, a truth that isn't loud, yet clear enough that you can't turn away from it. Money was never the enemy of harmony. Money is only a mirror. It reflects how you see your own worth. When you believe you must sacrifice to deserve, money becomes a burden. When you believe you shouldn't ask for too much, money becomes a source of tension. But when you begin to respect yourself more fully, money simply becomes a natural flow, responding to how much you allow yourself to receive. There is a very quiet moment when this realization settles in. No sense of victory, no overwhelming excitement, just clarity spreading through your chest, like finally understanding something that has followed you for a long time without ever being named. You see that those old beliefs weren't wrong. They were formed during a time when you needed protection. And now, as you've grown, they are no longer necessary. When a cycle ends, it doesn't ask you to throw everything away. It simply invites you to set down what has already fulfilled its purpose. You don't need to become someone else to enter a new phase of life. You only need to stop carrying the stories that make you smaller. And in that moment, a strange feeling arises, both light and deeply grounded, as if you're standing at the edge of a different way of living, where abundance no longer stands opposite balance, but exists alongside it. As this truth slowly sinks in, you begin to look at money differently, no longer something to avoid, no longer something to brace yourself against. It becomes part of life, honestly reflecting how you treat yourself each day. And from that subtle shift, a new awareness begins to form, that maybe you are already richer than you once believed, not only in material ways, but in understanding, in maturity, and in your ability to create a harmonious life in a way that is uniquely your own. There is a very specific moment when everything suddenly becomes clear without needing much explanation. It feels like standing in front of a scale that has been off balance for a long time, and for the first time, you place on it not fear, not doubt, but the truth itself. Libra begins to feel this on a very ordinary morning. Nothing special happens, nothing dramatic occurs, yet inside, something quietly shifts. You begin to look back at everything you've been through, no longer through self-blame, but with a gentle sense of curiosity. And then you see it clearly. The skills you carry were never small. They were simply placed in spaces that weren't wide enough for them to shine. You did more than you were ever recognized for. You brought more value than you were ever paid for. Not because you were weaker, but because you became used to stepping back so everything around you could remain balanced. The experiences you've gathered over time begin to reveal themselves differently now. The moments you listened when others weren't ready to speak. The times you connected people who seemed nothing alike. The way you sensed the atmosphere before anyone said a word. These are not things everyone can do, and they were never invisible. They simply needed to be seen in the right way. Libra's subtlety was never a weakness. It is a rare asset in a world accustomed to urgency and rigidity. The ability to create harmony, to read emotion, to build bridges between differences, these are values that can't be easily measured, yet they create profound impact. And when you allow yourself to truly see that, a quiet thought appears. Maybe I'm not as lacking as I once believed. In the deepest sense, you were never short on money. You were short on permission. Permission to receive according to your true value. Permission to say this effort is worth that amount. Permission to stop feeling guilty when life responds to your growth with abundance. When this realization settles in, a calm spreads through you. Not excitement, not a rush, but a steady sense of security. You begin to feel the inner scale shift, no longer tilted entirely toward giving, no longer leaning fully toward endurance. Slowly, it returns to center, a place where you can remain kind without sacrificing yourself. This isn't a moment of becoming cold or calculating. This is a moment of maturity in how you recognize your own worth. You may still do familiar things. You may still move through life with the same outer rhythm. But inside, everything is different. When money comes up, your chest no longer tightens. When you think about receiving, you no longer feel the need to over-explain. You understand now that true balance isn't about everyone receiving the same share, but about each person living in alignment with the value they carry. Within that understanding, a soft light begins to appear. The light of knowing that you don't need to chase wealth. You only need to stop turning away from it. When you stand in the right place, when you allow yourself to be seen fairly, the natural flow finds you. Not rushed, not forced, just on time. In that quiet moment, when everything seems to settle into its proper place, you begin to feel lighter, as if an invisible weight has just been set down. And from that sense of release, something very important begins to form. A quiet readiness to let go of old roles and to walk forward with a new relationship to your own value. a place where you no longer need permission to be abundant, only the honesty to receive what you truly deserve. There are moments in life that don't need tears, don't need goodbyes, yet still carry the full weight of a true ending. Libra steps into this moment with a very unfamiliar feeling. Not painful as you once feared, not empty as you once imagined, just a deep settling, a quiet knowing that a part of you has completed its role. That older version of you tried very hard, a version that always asked for permission before receiving, always hesitated when it came to your own needs. You became used to asking, "Is this okay? Am I allowed? Will this bother anyone? Will this make someone uncomfortable?" You lived in quiet anticipation of approval from the outside world, forgetting that some things only require agreement from within. That version of you was also afraid that talking about money, about value, about worth would change how others saw you, afraid that your kindness would be mistaken for ambition, afraid that asking to be paid fairly would cost you the ease and warmth you always held so dear. And because of that fear, you chose silence far more often than was ever necessary. There was a belief you carried for a long time, that you had to become more deserving before you could be abundant, work more, endure more, be better, be perfect, give up another piece of yourself. That belief didn't come from weakness. It came from a desire for safety. Safety in love, safety in relationships, safety in not being judged. But now, you can see clearly that this version of you is tired, not because it was wrong, but because it traveled far beyond what it was meant to carry. It helped you survive. It helped you belong. It carried you through seasons that required patience and restraint. And now, because you are steadier, more aware, more grounded, it no longer needs to stand at the center of your life. This moment does not feel like loss. It feels like a quiet ritual. You are not burying a part of yourself in grief. You are placing it down with gratitude, grateful that it protected you when you were not yet strong, grateful that it guided you through times that required softness more than strength. And with respect, you allow it to rest. A lightness appears when you do, as if you've removed a coat you wore for too long, one that no longer fits. You are not exposed. You are not empty. You are simply more spacious inside, more room to breathe, more space for new choices, new ways of living, healthier relationships with money and with value. When the old version is released, there is no loud sound, only a meaningful silence. And within that silence, you begin to feel something essential, that you don't need to become someone else to deserve abundance. You only need to stop shrinking yourself to fit outdated frames. And in the space that has just opened, a gentle readiness begins to form, a readiness to walk forward with a different relationship to money. One no longer built on fear or permission, but on respect, maturity, and a quiet promise to yourself that from here on, you will no longer abandon your own value. When space is created, the first thing that appears is not the urge to fill it. It is a steady stillness, like the feeling that comes after you've walked through enough struggles to no longer feel the need to chase anything at all. Libra begins to sense a new relationship forming, quiet, unshowy, yet deep with maturity. This time, money does not enter your life as a challenge. It arrives as a conversation. A calm presence where neither side needs to strain or perform. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself. You no longer feel the urge to avoid it. You simply look at it directly, clearly, honestly. You begin to set financial boundaries in a very natural way, not through hardness, but through self-respect. You know how much you can give and where you need to stop. You no longer feel guilty saying, "This doesn't fit, this isn't fair, this is my limit." Boundaries are no longer walls that separate. They become outlines that allow relationships to grow healthier. Along with that, the way you value your own effort begins to change. You no longer measure your worth through other people's eyes. You see it through a clear understanding of what you've lived through, what you carry, and what you are capable of creating. When you speak about money now, your voice no longer trembles. When you receive, you no longer apologize. You understand that fairness does not make you less kind. It simply allows you to live more truthfully. Something very subtle happens during this time. You stop trying to attract money by forcing yourself to do more, endure more, or trade away your peace. Instead, you attract money through the balance within you. When you no longer lean too far toward giving or enduring, your energy stabilizes. And that stability has a powerful pull. Money begins to respond to your clarity, not always through large numbers right away, but through a sense that things move more smoothly, less friction, less inner conflict. You notice that you no longer tense up when making financial decisions. You know where you stand, and that knowing brings a deep sense of ease. In this new relationship, money is no longer pressure. It is no longer a test of whether you are good enough or strong enough. It becomes a partner, a companion that reflects how you care for yourself, how you respect your time, your energy, and your wisdom. When you treat yourself with fairness, money begins to treat you the same way. There is a clear gentleness in how this feels. You are no longer afraid that abundance will throw you off balance. Instead, you see that abundance helps you become more grounded, more generous, more fully present in your relationships. You don't have to choose between harmony and wealth. You begin to understand that the two can exist together. And within that understanding, a quiet commitment forms. No vows, no announcements, just a deep inner agreement that you will not return to the old ways of living that once depleted you. You choose to walk with money the way you would walk with a mature companion, a relationship where both sides are respected, heard, and allowed to grow together. A very subtle shift happens when you no longer feel the need to strain yourself to control everything. Libra begins to realize that some answers don't come from thinking harder, but from listening more deeply. On this day, your intuition doesn't whisper. It speaks clearly, calmly, with quiet certainty. You sense exactly where you need to stop, not out of fear, but because you can clearly feel that your energy no longer belongs there. There are investments that once made you feel safe, but now only leave you tired. There are choices that were right in another season, but if continued, would pull you back into old cycles. And when you see this, there is no regret, only relief. Relief that you are finally aware enough not to keep walking the wrong path. At the same time, a new focus begins to form. You know exactly where your resources belong. No more scattering your energy, no more hesitation between too many directions. You understand now that abundance doesn't come from doing everything, but from doing what truly fits you. Your intuition guides you toward choices that feel grounded, quiet choices, yet deep. Choices that make you feel like you are building something, not running from something. Opportunities appear during this time that look very tempting. They promise quick rewards, recognition, the feeling of being chosen. But instead of being pulled in, you listen to your body's first response. A slight drop, a shift in your heartbeat, a faint sense of incompleteness. And you understand that not everything that shines is meant for you. Saying no in this moment is not missing out. It is an act of self-protection, rooted in care. The biggest difference now is that you no longer hesitate, not because you know every answer, but because you've learned to trust what you feel. You understand that intuition doesn't need proof. It is shaped by everything you've lived through, by the times you listened to others, by the moments you observed without speaking, by those quiet instances when you sensed something before it happened. Libra's intuition is the result of sensitivity, not chance. When it comes to money, you no longer separate it from how you feel. You stop forcing yourself to be logical in choices that leave you uneasy. You allow yourself to honor peace of mind as an important measure. You understand now that a right decision is not only one that brings gain, but one that lets you sleep well at night. There is a clear calm in this state of being. You don't need to rush into action. You don't need to prove that you've changed. You simply remain present with a renewed trust in yourself. And that trust spreads outward. It touches how you work, how you choose, how you face numbers and invitations alike. In that quiet space, you begin to sense something beautiful. You no longer need anyone to lead you. You have become your own guide, not through hardness, but through deep listening, not through fear of missing out, but through the understanding that what is truly meant for you will never ask you to sacrifice your peace. And as you move forward with this clarity, a steady strength spreads through you, as if everything you've learned, released, and understood along the way is slowly coming together. No longer scattered pieces, but a foundation solid enough for you to stand, take a deep breath, and keep walking forward with the quiet confidence that you are moving in the right direction, in a way that is uniquely Libra. There is a very gentle truth you have carried throughout this entire journey, even in moments when you forgot it. Your abundance never left you. It did not disappear during the years you had to endure. It did not fade in the times you gave more than you received. It simply stood there quietly, waiting for you to look back at it with a more honest gaze towards yourself. Monday the 22nd doesn't bring anything completely new. It only illuminates what has been there for a very long time. When you look back on your life with honesty, you can clearly see how much you have accumulated. Not only skills or experience, but inner maturity. The ability to remain steady in the middle of contradiction. The subtle way you meet people in life itself. That is a form of wealth no one can take from you. When you stop chasing other people's definitions, when you no longer try to prove that you are worthy, a deep calm appears. You don't need to strain to be abundant. You only need to allow yourself to see clearly what you have already created. And once that permission is given, life begins to respond in a very natural way. From this point on, money is no longer a story of anxiety or pressure. It becomes a language that reflects how you respect your own time, your energy, and your wisdom. When you treat yourself with fairness, money begins to move with greater fairness as well. Not always quickly, but always with direction. You start to feel the difference in the smallest choices, in how you receive an offer, in how you decline what no longer fits, in how you decide where to place your time and effort. Nothing feels heavy anymore. Nothing requires long explanations. There is only a quiet certainty, as if you have returned to the place where you belong. Something beautiful happens when you live in alignment with your true value. You don't just change your relationship with money, you change your relationship with life itself. You become more present, more generous without draining yourself, more grounded without becoming hard. The harmony you have always searched for is no longer something you must protect through sacrifice. It becomes a natural state once you stop turning away from yourself. If there is one message this day leaves behind, it is a very gentle reminder. You don't need to become anyone else. You don't need to move faster. You don't need to try harder to prove anything. You only need to live in alignment with your true value and allow the world to respond to that in its own way. Libra has walked a long road, not to become wealthy by someone else's standards, but to understand that true abundance begins with self-respect, with knowing you are worthy, with no longer lowering your value just to maintain outer peace. And when you stand firmly in that understanding, life begins to open very different doors, not loudly, not dramatically, but strong enough for you to walk through without looking back, warm enough to remind you that you are no longer alone on this journey, and honest enough for you to say to yourself, in a very quiet moment, that you are finally ready to live in alignment with your value and to receive abundance as a natural part of who you are.